Hey everyone, thanks for learning to play games. My name is Lance, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to play Cangaceiros. This is a brand new game from Eris. It is a 2 to 5 player game that takes roughly 1 to 2 hours to play and is a competitive game where you're going to be competing with your fellow players to gain the most fame. So throughout the game, the players are going to be competing with each other, moving around the board, gaining bonuses, building up their chief, and taking different actions that are going to get them fame points, including taking out Valentes and doing all kinds of other stuff. So throughout this video, I'm going to teach you how to play, starting with components, setup, player turns, and endgame conditions and scoring. As always, if you find my videos helpful, if you like what I do, please consider that like button and subscribe to my channel. It's one of the easiest ways you can support channels like mine so we can continue to grow and be able to produce this content. If you want to get notified anytime I drop new videos, also get that notification bell will ring, and that'll let you know when I drop new stuff. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you how to play. There are 5 different decks of cards that players are going to be interacting with throughout the game. I want to take a closer look at each one of these. The first one are the action cards, and these are specific to each player, as each player will have their own deck of action cards that is going to be signified by the little color slosh on the top of each side of the card. So for example, this is the blue player starter deck. With these cards on the back side, each one of them is going to be broken down into 2 halves. You're going to have the attack half where you can use that to attack Valentes, or the bottom half where it has different actions that you can perform during your turn. Then each card is also going to have some bonuses to the 3 different stats when you are in combat, and I'll go into more detail about those and the different actions during that step in the game. The next 2 decks are upgrade decks, and at the beginning of the game there's only going to be a limited amount of these that are going to be out on the table, and then throughout the game players can upgrade their regular action cards with these cards, and you're going to have the Sarah cards and the Katinga cards, and again these are going to be broken down the same way, but as you can see they definitely have some better benefits and better stats to them, so you're going to want to grab these, and again these are going to be limited, so once they're gone, they're gone. The next deck of cards are the chief cards, and each player is going to start the game with one of these, and then throughout the game that player may lose their chief due to wounds, or they may retire their chief for points and gain additional or another one. Each one of the chief cards is going to have the name of the chief on the top, and then going down the side are the different stats for that chief, including their guns, protection, and Fako, which is their melee attacks. Next, you're going to have, each chief is going to have a special ability here, and then they're going to have their base ability at the bottom. Each chief has 3 training points, and at the beginning of the game you're going to be placing your cubes on these training points, basically locking those different things that will give access, or different areas that will stop the player from using. And then throughout the game you can remove those training points and gain access to those different abilities. Finally, each chief is going to have a number of wounds, which are the little blood splatter spaces on their different areas. And you'll have to place a cube on there to cover up that wound when you start taking wounds with your chief. The final deck of cards are the life goal cards, and as I talked about during the chief cards, you can retire them. In order to do this, you must have a chief that is completely trained by removing all 3 training points from their card, and then you must have the resources listed on at least one of the life goal cards. At that point, you can take the action by spending those different resources listed on the top of the card of your choice, and then you're going to gain a number of fame points minus the number of wounds that your chief currently has. And then you'll remove that chief and gain a new one, as I'll cover a little bit later. For board setup, the first thing you're going to do is lay out the board and make sure you have it on the correct side based on the number of players, which you'll find up in the top corner. For my game, I'm going to go ahead and set up for a 2-player game, so I'm going to use the 2-3-player side of the board. To create your Valente deck, the first thing you're going to do is separate it into the 3 different decks based on the number of Valente that are shown on the back. 1, 2, and 3. From there, then, based on the number of players that are playing, you're going to take 2 cards out of each of these decks. Each of these decks will be comprised of 2 to 3 player cards and 4 to 5 player cards. In my game, I'm setting up for the 2 to 3 player, so I'm going to remove all the 4 to 5 player cards from each one of these decks, which I've already done the other 2. From there, then, you're going to shuffle up the 3 Valente deck and place that in the bottom. Next, you're going to do the same thing with the Valente 2 deck, shuffling it up and placing it on top of the Valente 3 deck, and then again the same thing with the Valente 1 deck, placing it on top of the 2, and now you have your Valente deck. Now that you've created your Valente deck, you're going to go ahead and place that out on its spot on the board. Next, go ahead and grab the Sarah and Katinga decks, shuffle up each one of those, and place out a number of them based on the number of players plus 1. So I'm playing with 2 players, so I'm going to place out 3 cards in each one of their spots. Any cards that I do not place out for this initial part of setup, I will return to the game box as they will not be used for this game. Grab the Valente reinforcement tokens and the prison tokens, shuffle up each one of those, and place those off to the side of the game board. For player setup, each player is going to choose a color and gain the dashboard of that color, along with the 3 training tokens and their fame token, 1 gang leader, and 11 Cangaceiros. Then each player is also going to receive 1 Each player will also receive their deck of starting action cards. Go ahead and shuffle this deck up and place it to the side of your board. And then each player is going to be dealt 2 chiefs. From there, then the players are going to look at those cards and choose one of them to be their starting chief. So let's go ahead and say with this player that I choose this one. And then this one will be returned to the bottom of the deck. Then go ahead and add the training points to the 3 different spots on your chief card. And these will be blocked until you unlock those training points. Also leave some space on the other side of your card so that you have a discard pile for your action cards. The rest of the chief cards can be placed out on their spot on the game board. Grab all of the event tiles and place out the peace tile in the first spot, and then with the rest of them, go ahead and shuffle those up and place out 6 of them at random on the top spots on each of those tracks. Any that you do not use for this, go ahead and return those to the box. Shuffle up the life goals deck and draw a number of these equal to the number of players plus 1 and place them on their slots. Again, any cards you don't use for this are returned to the game box, and you will not use those for this game. Go ahead and grab all of the Fazenda tiles and separate those into their 3 different piles. Also go through and make sure on the back of each one of those is the number of players that you're using. If you have any tokens that are for players that you're not going to be playing, again for my game is 4 or 5, then I'll go ahead and return those to the box and I won't be using those. You'll be using, for my game, I'll be using the 2 through 5 tokens. Once you have that, then go ahead and shuffle up those tokens and place those out. So I'll have the 2 Sierra tokens going into the brown spaces, the 3 Katinga tokens going into the 3 green spaces, and the rest of them are going to go into the yellow spaces. Place the Blessing token face up on its gray space. Then go ahead and shuffle up the reward tiles and place those out below the event tiles. In a 2 or 3 player game, there's only going to be 1 slot. In a 4 or 5 player game, there'll be 2 slots per event. Any tokens you don't use for the game are going to go ahead and be returned to the box. Also go ahead and make piles of the different tokens you're going to be using, such as the Valente soldiers, the wound tokens, vengeance tokens, and friendships tokens, and all the Reese tokens you'll be using for the game. Choose one player to be the first player, and this can be done in any way you want to, and give them the Faco token. So I'll have the blue player be the starting player. Each player is going to take one of their Cangacero tokens and place it in the Recife prison. And then each player is also going to take their fame token and place it on the number 4 spot on the fame track. Each player is also going to take their gang token and place it in the Wizero token space. Before getting into the game, there are a couple of features on the game board that I want to talk about that we haven't covered yet. So first off, you already saw during setup the different cards that went out, and on the side of the board here is the fame track that as you gain fame points, you're going to move your markers up on that. Other than that, you're also going to have a number of different spaces out on the board, and there are different types of spaces. You're going to have city spaces, which there are 4 cities on the edges of the board, and you'll have 1 city in the center. Now, cities cannot be garrisoned, as I'll go into a little bit more later, and the outer cities can be travel, or you can go from one city to another following the railroad around the board. And each city gives you 2 different options of different cities to go to if you want to. In the center of the board, you're going to have the Katinga spaces, and there's 3 of these, and they have a red border around them, which means when you move into there, you're going to take a wound. You'll have 2 Secha spaces, and you'll also have these little arrows on here, which is going to be for the Valente movement. If they don't have a target, then they're going to use the arrow to determine where they move next, as I'll cover a little bit more in that section. Cangaceiros is played over at maximum 7 rounds. There are 2 different ways that Cangaceiros can end. Either at the end of the 7th round, in which case the players will move into their scoring step and score, and whoever has the most fame points will win, or during the game if all of the life goal cards are claimed. At that point, at the end of the 3rd phase in that current round, then the game will end and the players will move straight into a scoring step. Either way, the players are going to be playing round after round. Each round is going to consist of 6 phases that are going to be done in order. I'm going to go through each one of those in more detail. The goal of the game is to have the most fame points, and players are going to do this by carrying out a number of different actions, including taking out Valentes, building up their chiefs, and hopefully retiring them to get those fame points, and a number of other things. So let's go ahead and head into it and start off with the first phase in the round. The first phase in the round is adding new Valentes. In order to do this, you're going to reveal a card except for the first round, as the card is already printed on the game board itself. In the top corner of the card is going to show the different Valentes and which cities they're going to be placed in. So I'm going to add 1 Valente to each one of the 4 outer cities. The second phase in the round is choosing action cards, and this is going to be done simultaneously by all players. In order to carry this out, each player is going to take all the cards from their draw deck, look through those cards, and choose 3 of them to add to their hands. Now, if a player does not have enough cards in their draw deck, so let's go ahead and say, for example, this player only has 1 card left in his draw deck, and the rest of the cards are in his discard pile. The card that he has left is going to be added to his hand, and then the cards in his discard pile will be flipped back over, adding them back to his draw pile, which he's going to collect and look through again, choosing 2 of those cards to add to his hands, creating a hand of 3 cards for the next phase. The third phase in the round is playing action cards. This phase is going to start with the player that has the first player token and then proceed clockwise around the board. During a player's turn, that player is going to choose one of the action cards in their hand and play that card to use it either as the top half for its attack or the bottom half for its actions. And I'm going to go through each one of these in more detail next. Once that player has played that card, then they're going to place it in their discard pile, and then it'll pass to the next player to play a card. And this is going to continue going around until all players have played all 3 cards. Now, at the end of that, once a player has played their third card, if their gang meeple, which is their main meeple, is either in a Sarah or a Katinga space, they can choose to replace one of their action cards with one of the cards from that respective place. So if the player is at a Katinga space, they can choose one of the available Katinga cards to replace one of their action cards. And this could be a card either in their discard pile in their draw pile. You can choose any one of the 7 cards. Now, the card that is replaced is going to be returned to the box, as each player can only have a maximum of 7 cards in their action deck at any time. So any cards you replace are simply going to be removed from the game itself completely and put back into the box. Now, this part of the phase is only going to happen if there are any cards left of that respective type. For example, if a player is in the Katinga space and there are no Katinga cards left to claim, then that player will not be able to claim any new ones, as once they are gone, you will not replace them with new cards. So from here, I'm going to take a look at each one of the actions that is available to you, starting with the attack action, and then I'll move down to the actions and go through all of those different ones as well. Moving into it, the first action I want to cover is an attack action. In order to carry this out, your gang token, which is your main meeple, must be in a space or adjacent to a space that has Valentes. From there, your attack action always allows you to move up to 1 space and then attack, and you can do this in any order. So if you're already in a space with Valentes and you wish to attack them, you can do the attack first and then the movement after, however you want to do it, as long as they are in your space. From there, then, the attack action itself is going to be broken into 2 steps. These are going to be done in order. This is going to start with the shooting step, and then at the end of the shooting step, if there are any Valentes left, or if the chief has not been killed, if either one of those are met, then you'll move on to the melee phase. And both of these work pretty much the same way, but I'm going to cover each one of them in this action. So in this example, my gang is in the same space as 2 Valente, and I wish to perform an attack action. So we're going to carry that out. Again, I'm going to play a card from my hands. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this card here. I'm going to place this card to the side of my player board, as I'm going to use any bonus stats that are listed on there. And for this example, I have added a couple of the Cangaceiros to my player board already, and I did unlock one of my training points already, again for this example. So from there, before the next step, if I have a vengeance point or a vengeance token on my track, I can choose to spend that to get an additional fame point per Valente I kill. I don't have any vengeance tokens at this point, so then the next step is to reveal Vente reinforcement tokens, 1 per Valente that's out there. Again, I must spend the vengeance tokens before doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal. And I have 2 tokens out there since I have 2 Valente, and the card is going to list the number of wounds that each Valente has. And so for this example, each one of the Valente I'm attacking has 2 wounds, as there are 2 arrows in the card. From there, then, the attack again is going to be broken down into 2 steps, the shooting part and the melee part. And the melee part is only going to happen if there are Valente left and your chief is still alive. So let's move into the shooting part. In order to carry this part out, you're going to first calculate your total shooting points on your Valente. First, I'm going to check my Chief's card and see if I get any bonuses there. So my Chief's shooting stat is 2, so I get 2 points there. And then I also unlocked the first training point, which gives me +2 to this as well. So I'm going to have a total shooting stat of 4. Then I'm going to check my Cangacero line, and if I have any Cangaceros there, each one's going to grant me +1. So I have 2 more there for 6 points. And then my bonus card that I played is also going to give me an additional point there for a total of 7 for my shooting stat. From there, then I'm going to move over to the Valente and check their defense. So the Valente's card is going to give 2, and then the token here is going to give +1 to that for a total defense of 3. Now that I have both of those, I'm going to subtract the Valente's defense from my shooting total. So 7 minus 3 is going to be 4 points. Each point that I have that is remaining is going to be a wound to one of the Valente on the board, starting with the one closest to the card and working my way over, covering each one of the blood splatters based on the number of arrows. So in this example, each Valente has 2 wounds, so I would do 4 damage. But for this example, let's go ahead and say instead that I only did 3 points of damage so that there was a Valente remaining. From there, then the Valente are going to retaliate, calculating their shooting stat, looking at the card and then all the tokens. So the Valente have a shooting stat of 2. Then I'm going to check my defense. So my defense is 2 plus 1 for my bonus, as I don't have any Cangaceros on the defense line. So my total defense is 3. And I'm going to subtract that from their shooting. So 2 from 3 is 1. So my defense is higher and I don't take any wounds. But let's go ahead and say, for example, that I had a lower defense. So for each point that the Valente do over my defense, I would take 1 wound, which is going to either be added to my chief, covering up one of the blood splatter spots on the chief card, or removing a Valente from one of the lines on the rightmost side. So for example, if I chose one of the shooting side or Valentes from the shooting line, I would take this one first, working my way from the right to the left. Now, you have to allocate all of your wounds. Even if you choose your chief and your chief dies, if you have any remaining wounds and you still have Cangaceros on the lines, you have to remove those wounds by removing Cangaceros. And likewise, if you don't have any Cangaceros and you have your chief remaining with wounds, you have to allocate them to your chief. Now, if your chief is dead and you have no Cangaceros in the line, any remaining wounds are simply going to be discarded. So at this point, I'm going to evaluate the combat and determine if I move on to the melee step. If I have a Valente left, which there is 1 remaining, and I also my chief is still alive, both of those are true, so now I'm going to move on to the melee step. With the melee step, again, I'm going to calculate my melee stat, checking any bonuses, so my chief does not grant me any. I have 2 Cangaceros in the line, each one giving me +1. So I have 2 melee from there and no bonus from my card. So my total melee is 2. Now with melee, it bypasses the enemy's defense. So you will not calculate defense for the enemy. So the Valente is going to take 1 more or 2 wounds, but he can only take 1 more at this point. And so he is going to be eliminated. Then the Valente are going to retaliate. So the Valente again are going to total up their stat, which is 1 melee. And I have to take it on my character. I can either take it on my chief again, or I can take it off of one of the Cangaceros on the line. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to take it on my chief, and so I'm going to cover up one of those wound spots on that chief. And hopefully I'll be able to go and heal it at a later point. So at this point, the combat is over, and I'm going to determine any bonuses or fame points that I gain for this. First off, I gain a token for each Valente that I killed. So I killed 2 Valente, so I'm going to receive 2 tokens. And I can return these wound cubes to the box or the supply, as I don't need those. And any tokens there now can be returned and shuffled back into the token stack. At that point, I'm also going to check to see if I gain any fame points, which are going to be listed on the bottom corner of the card. In rounds 1 through 3, they do not grant you any fame points, so unless I played a vengeance token, which I did not, which would normally get me 1 point of fame for the vengeance, then I don't receive any points for the Valente I kill in rounds 1 through 3. In 4 and 5, the Valente are worth 1 point, and in rounds 6 and 7, they're worth 2, again without playing the vengeance tokens. So at this point, now I've resolved all that, and my melee attack has come to an end, and then it'll pass to the next player in clockwise order to start their turn. So now that I've covered the top part of the card, which is the attack action, let's go ahead and move down to the bottom of the card and show you the different types of actions you can perform if you choose that part of the card. So with this part, as you can see here on this image, normally you're going to have a couple of different icons on there. And each of these icons is a different action you can perform. Now with these actions, you can do them in any order you want to, doing the last one first or the first one in the order, however you want to do it. And there are 5 main actions that I'm going to cover. These are movement, garrison, training, plunder, and cunning. Now there are going to be different ones that are going to be listed on the Katinga and the Sarah cards, and those are going to be listed in the back of the rulebook, and each one of those works a little bit differently, so I'm not going to be covering them in this video as that would make this video very long, but each one of those is referenced there and explained how you carry those out. So from there, let's go ahead and move into the different actions, starting with a move action. So with a move action, this allows you to move from your space to an adjacent space that is connected by a border, which is any of the lines around that space. So for example, right now with our meeples in the middle, if my blue meeple wished to move, that meeple could move into any one of the Katinga spaces as they share a border, or into this space here, the space above the space they're in, or the space below. Now from there are a couple of other examples with this. Again, if you are in a city, the outer cities are connected by railroad. So if I was in one of those, I could follow that railroad to the next city. Now, railroads only connect cities. You cannot use them to connect to other spaces. The garrison action allows you to take a Cangaceiros from your reserve and add it into the same space as your gang in the fazenda of that space, which means you cannot add a garrison to a city or the 0 starting space. There's also no limit to the number of Cangaceiros that can be in a garrison. The training action allows you to choose one of the spots on your chief that still has a training marker on it and remove it, adding it to your reserve. When you remove a training marker, if it is blocking a space, you immediately gain the ability on that space as well. The plunder action allows you to activate a Cangaceiros or a city that your gang meeple is in. Furthermore, if you have another location that has a garrison of yours, you can choose to activate one additional location of your choice that has a garrison. Now there's a couple important notes with this. First off, if a location has multiple garrisons from different players, then the garrison that has the highest number of Cangaceiros is going to be the controlling garrison. So in this example here, my blue player has 1 and my red player has 2 Cangaceiros. So the red player controls this location and I cannot choose that location to activate and gain the benefits of that. Another important note with this is if your gang is in the same space as another garrison, you cannot choose to activate that location twice. Each location can only be activated once. So in this situation, I would only be able to activate this location once. And since I don't control this location, I would not be able to activate that. And that's the only other spot where I have garrisons out on the board. The other thing is with cities. So cities cannot be garrisons, so you must have your gang meeple in there to activate it. And cities don't provide you with resources. Instead, you can spend resources that are listed on the city to gain fame points. And that's going to be true for the 3 cities on the side, with the one exception being the prison. In that one, you cannot do a plunder action. You must do an attack action instead, and I will cover that a little bit later in the video. So going back to my example here, I would choose the order in which I want to gain these resources. So this one would let me heal 2, and then this one would gain me a coin. And then I can also choose to place a Cangaceiros on my gun line. Now, an important note with this is that you can choose not to receive certain rewards as well. So I could choose, how I want to receive these and if I want to take them or not. The final action I want to go over is a cunning action. This action allows you to take a Cangaceiros from your reserve and place it on one of the active event tiles that still has a reward token underneath it. An active event tile is one that has not been resolved yet. So in my example here, let's say that I choose to place it on this tile. From there, then I'll gain the reward token underneath it and resolve that immediately. An important note with this is if an event tile does not have a reward token, you cannot choose to place a Cangacero on there. Each reward tile can only have one Cangacero of your color on it, and this is only going to happen in 4 or 5 player games, as in 4 or 5 player games, each event tile will have 2 reward tokens underneath it. Another important note with this is that when resolving an event tile in Phase 4, if your Cangacero is on there, you will not have to resolve that event tile and suffer the negative effects of it. And then finally, with your Cangacero, you are never going to get that one back. Even after the event tile is resolved, that Cangacero will stay on that event tile for the rest of the game. So now that I've gone through all the different actions, I want to put this all together and show you a sample turn. So moving over to the player that has the first player token, the blue player is going to start us off, and the player is going to start by playing one of the cards from his hand. So I am going to start, I think I'm going to start with this card here, and I'm going to do the actions at the bottom. So this is going to let me do a move and a garrison. So I'm going to move down here, and then I'm going to garrison that fazenda. So then I'll add one of my Cangaceros there, and that is all of that. So then that'll be discarded, and we're over to the red player to go. So with the red player, I'm going to go ahead and play this one. That's going to let me move up to 2 spaces. So I'm going to go ahead and move here, and then I will move up there. And that will take care of that. So back over to the blue player. I think I'm going to play this one here. So that's going to let me move and plunder. So I'm going to go ahead and move first. So I'm going to move down here, and then I'll do the plunder. So that's going to let me plunder this space here that my gang is currently in. So I'm going to gain a coin from the supply, and I gain a gun, Cangacero. So I can add a Cangacero to the line on my gun line. So I'll do that. And then this one here lets me add a gun or 1 Cangacero to the gun line and 1 to my Faco line. So an important note with this is that you pretty much always want to add Cangaceros in these different areas, because if you ever need to place a Cangacero and you're out of Cangaceros, you can move them from the board or from your card. The one exception to that is you cannot take them from the prison. So any Cangaceros of yours that are in the prison, you cannot remove. But those on the board and on your card, you can freely move. So if I was out of Cangaceros and I really wanted one on that line, I could choose to take one from the board or from a different line and add it to that line. All right, so that is my turn. So I'm going to go ahead and discard that. Back over to the red player to go. That player is going to... What do I want to do with this? I think I'm going to do that. So that's going to let me garrison, and I'm going to plunder. So that's going to get me 1 on my protection line, and it's also going to give me a vengeance token. So I'll add a vengeance token to my line, and that will be that. So over to the blue player. And with the blue player, I think I'm going to do the move and attack, as I really don't want this Valente here to interfere during the next step when the Valente are going to move and attack. So I'm going to go ahead and move in here first as the first part of this, and I'm going to do an attack action on that Valente. So again, in order to carry that out, I'll go ahead and add this over to my discard so that I have my bonus stats on my track. I'm going to flip over one of the Valente tokens, and I don't have any vengeance tokens to play at that point. So I'm going to just go ahead and flip this over. And this Valente again has 2 hit points, so I have to do at least 2 damage to eliminate him. And so then I'm going to move into the ranged attack. So I have 2 from my chief, and then I have 2 from the Cangaceros on that line for a total of 4. His defense is 3, so I'm going to do 1 wound to him there. Then he's going to retaliate, but he does not have any shooting stats, so I don't have to worry about that. And then moving over to the melee step, again, my chief, or both the Valente and the chief are alive, so I will move into that melee stat. So now I'm going to attack him. I have that one that I just added, which was super helpful, as that'll do the final wound to him, so that'll eliminate him. And he retaliates, but he does not have anything to retaliate with again. So I am going to move into resolving. I gain him as a token. He is not worth any points right now at the bottom of his card, and I didn't play a vengeance token, so I won't get any points there. These are going to be returned to the supply, and this will be shuffled back into the tokens. And that will resolve that, and that is the end of my turn. So moving back over to the red player to resolve his final step, I can do, what do I want to do with this? I can move and then do a training, or a garrison and a training. So I'm going to go ahead and do my training first, removing that token there. And then the garrison, I'll go ahead and add another meeple there. So at this point, then this is going to end the red player's turn. And since the red player ended in a Sierra, I can choose one of the Sierra cards to add to my hand. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one here, and then I'll take all of the cards in my draw pile, and I can also choose cards in my discard pile if I wanted to. But let's see here. I will replace. I think I will replace this one here. So this will be returned to the box, as you only can ever have 7 cards in your deck. And then this one will be added to wherever you discarded. So since I discarded out of my draw pile, this will be added straight into my draw pile. If I would have discarded from my discard pile, it would have been added into there instead. And that is the end of his turn. So that is the end of the players, or this example, and we'll move on to the next step. Now there's one other important note with action cards. If you have an action card you don't wish to play for its abilities, you can choose to discard that card without resolving it to carry out your chief's ability on the bottom of their card, with most chiefs having the same ability, which is to discard an action card without resolving it to gain either a plunder, a garrison, or a move action. Now some chiefs will have some special abilities with that as well, so make sure you reference the back of the rulebook on pages 14 and 15 to check if your chief has a special ability. The fourth phase in the round is resolving the current event. That is going to be the event that is on the leftmost space that has not been flipped over yet. Each player, starting with the player that has the first player token, must resolve this unless they have one of their Cangaceiros on that event. Once all players have resolved the event, they're going to flip that tile face down, representing that that tile has been resolved. Another important note with this is that all of the different event tiles are referenced in the back of the rulebook. The fifth phase in the round is activating Valentes, and this phase is going to have 2 steps. First, you're going to move the Valentes, and then you'll attack with them. So first, let's talk about movement. So with movement, Valentes are always going to move towards an adjacent space that has a gang. If there are multiple spaces, then they're going to move towards the gang that has the highest amount of fame. From there, if it's still tied, then the player that has the first player token will decide which space that Valente will move into. From there, if there is not a space with a gang, then the Valente will move towards a space that has a garrison. If there again is a tie, then the first player will choose which way that goes. And finally, if neither one of those are true, then the Valente will follow the arrow on its space, moving into the next space following that arrow. So now let's look at a couple of examples of this. Starting from left and moving all the way over to the right, I'll activate each one of the Valentes, resolving its movement. So with my Valente here, each space around him does not have a gang or a garrison, so he is simply going to move following the arrow on his space. So he'll move down here. Now, an important note with this is that Valentes can never use the railroad, so he could not have used the railroad to make it over to this location that has the gang meeple on it. Moving up from there, then this Valente here is adjacent to a space that has a gang, so he's simply going to move into that location. The Valente down here is not going to move because he's in the same space as a gang. And then finally, the Valente over here, does not have anybody around him, so he's simply going to follow the arrow moving into this space here. Now, there are a couple important notes with this, and these are also referenced as a quick reference above each one of the event tiles. Throughout the game, the Valentes are not allowed to move into the Judas arrow space, and from rounds 1 to 5, the Valente also cannot move into the Katinga spaces. So at this point now we're going to go back and handle all the Valente attacks. Now in the rulebook it does state to do this all in one go, where you move each Valente and resolve an attack, and you can do it that way. It's however you want to do it. I find it a little easier to separate their movement and then the attacks, but however you want to do it. So moving into the attack part of this now, each Valente that is in the same space as a gang or garrison is going to perform an attack action against them. And if there are multiple gangs in the space, the gang that has the highest fame is going to be the one that's targeted. If there's still a tie, then it's going to be the player that has a first player token that will decide which way that tie is broken. And all the Valente in a space are going to attack the same gang or garrison. If there's not a gang in that space, then it'll go after the garrison. And again, if there's multiple garrisons, it'll be resolved the same way. So with that, then you're going to resolve it based on this chart, which is going to determine the number of Valente in there. And as you can see on this chart, as you get into 3 or more, you're simply going to kill your chief, or with the garrison, all of them are going to be captured and placed in the prison. So from there, let's move into this. And there's a couple of other important things that are going to happen with this. So first off, moving up to the top one here, I have one Valente in here against that gang. So he's going to deal 1 wound to the chief. At that point, then the chief will take a token and place it on one of his open wound slots. If he doesn't have any open wound slots, then he is going to be eliminated, and you'll have to resolve that, which I'll cover a little bit later. The other option is, if you have any coins, you can buy them or corrupt those Valente not to attack you. Each Valente is going to cost you 1 coin, and you can choose to do 1 or more and let the rest go through and attack. So that way, if, say, for example, you had 3 Valente attacking you and you didn't want to lose your chief, you could spend 1 to corrupt one of them, only leaving 2 left to do 2 damage and not killing your chief outright. Again, as long as you have spaces open that you can take wounds on your chief's card. So with the red player, he's going to go ahead and corrupt that Valente and not have that Valente attack. So his turn is done. The Valente over here is not going to attack anybody, as nobody is in the same space as him. The Valente over here, again, will attack the blue player. And the blue player is going to take a damage on his gang. So he's simply going to take a wound on his chief. And I'm going to go ahead and cover up, I think I'll cover up the +2 on his defense, as hopefully I'll be able to get to a space to heal that. So then that attack is going to be resolved, and we'll move over to the last Valente, who is, again, not in the same space as anybody, so he would not have anything to resolve. But let's go ahead and say, for example, instead that he was here. In this example, he's going to capture one of the Cangaceiros in that space, adding that player's Cangaceiro to the prison. Once you've resolved all of the Valente's attacks, the Valente turn is done, and you're ready to move into the final phase of the round. The final phase in the round is the end of round phase, and this phase is very simple with 3 basic steps. The first one is passing the first player token to the next player in clockwise order. Then, if the blessing token is face down with just the heart, you're going to flip it face up. And then finally, you're going to flip over the next card in the Valente's deck, revealing that card for the next round. So at this point, there's just a couple more things to cover. The first is attacking a prison. In order to attack a prison, you must have at least 1 Cangaceiro in there or more. And it doesn't have to be yours. It could be any player's. There just has to be at least 1 in there. From there, then it works pretty much the same way as attacking Valente, with one exception to that. So let's get into the example real quick and just go over this one more time. So in order to resolve this, each Valente that is in there is going to defend the prison. So you're going to reveal a token per Valente in there, so there's just 1. And then the prison itself is also going to have its own defense. So you're going to reveal one of the prison tiles and place it in there as well. From there, then the prison is going to have the same number of hit points as a regular Valente does based on the card that you're playing. And then you would resolve that attack as normal, just like a regular attack, totaling up all of the points on your attack card and the Valentes going back and forth. Now, once everything is resolved, if you have done enough wounds for each Valente you've killed, you'll get fame points based on the Valente card that's out. So right now you wouldn't get any, but you still receive those tokens, the Valente, as reward tokens. So you'd add that to your area. If you did enough wounds to defeat the prison itself, then you can choose one group of Cangaceiros in there to free. This can be yours or somebody else's. If let's say the blue player had 3 Cangaceiros in there and you chose to free them, all of those would be returned to that player's reserve and you would receive 1 fame point per Cangaceiro that you rescue. I also want to go over the blessing token. So once per round, when a player is on the same space as a blessing token, that player can take a plunder action or use a plunder action to flip that token over and resolve the effects of that token, which allows the player to switch 2 active events, so events that have not been resolved yet or flipped over. And in this way, that gives that player potential access to that event. So let's look at an example of this. Let's go ahead and say, for example, that my blue player had placed a Cangaceiro on this event already and taken that token. So at this point, no one else can play a Cangaceiro on that event, as there is no bonus tiles there. And the red player really wants to have a Cangaceiro on that because he doesn't want to suffer the effects of that. So let's go ahead and say, for example, that the red player plays a card that lets him plunder during his turn. And so he's going to activate this token, flipping it over so that no other player can use this during the round for this effect. And so he's going to go ahead and move this tile with, let's go ahead and say this tile here. So that would slide over. All of the Cangaceiros on this tile will move with it. And now, during a later action or step, he can take a Cunning action to place a Cangaceiro there, as there is a token underneath this now, and so that he can potentially benefit from that. Now, if another player goes here during the round and does a plunder, then that player will simply heal 1 wound. The next thing I want to cover is what happens when a chief dies. So let's go ahead and say with the blue player that that player's chief takes 2 more wounds. So the first wound would go into the last wound slot that is available on that chief. So at this point, with the extra wound, the chief would die. And so the chief's card is going to be cleared. The player is going to lose a number of fame points based on the bounty, which is going to be next to the fame board. And it's going to depend on where you are in the fame track. So let's go and say, for example, the blue player was right here at 18. So that player's bounty is 2, so the player will immediately lose 2 fame points for losing their chief. This card is going to be discarded from the game, and then that player is going to draw 2 new cards from the chief's deck, the top of the deck, choosing one of those and adding the other one to the bottom of the deck. Then that one will go into that player's slot, and you'll place all 3 of the training point tokens on that chief's card. And then the final step is to take the game meeple from its space and add it to the Judo Zero space. Now that I've covered chief's deaths, let's go ahead and look at retirement. So in order for a chief to retire, that player must have all of the different training point tokens removed from their chief card, and they must have the resources of at least one of the life goal cards that is still on the board. So with my player, I do have all the resources for this life goal card, so let's take a look at how this works. So first off, I have to pay all of those resources, which first is going to cost me 3 coins, and then I have to remove 2 of the Cangaceiros from garrisons on the board. So I have those 2 there, so I'm going to go ahead and remove those, adding those back to my supply. And that completes all of the resources on this card. So then I'm going to receive 9 fame points minus any wounds that I have. So my chief has 1 wound, so I'm going to receive 8 points for that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then this card is simply going to be removed from the game, and you would not refill that slot with that. And then again, you're going to carry out all the rest of the steps on replacing a chief just like you did when your chief died. You'll draw 2 new cards, choosing one of them, and adding the training points back to that chief's card. And the final thing to go over is endgame scoring. So in order to do this, you're going to reference the quick guide at the bottom of the board, and you're simply going to go through each one of those different things and add up that total that you have of each of those items and add it all together and then divide it by 3. So starting at the first section, you're going to count up the number of Serra and Katinga cards that you have in your draw and discard pile. So with this player, I have 1 of the Serra cards, so I have 1 point there. Next, I'm going to count up the number of lentes I have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I'm at 7 points. You're going to count up the number of Cangaceiros that you have on your player board. So I have 5 there. So I'm up to 12 points. Next, you're going to count up the number of Cangaceiros you have garrisoned on the board. So I have 13, 14, 15, 16 points there. I'm going to count the number of coins I have, so I have 4 more, so I'm at 20 points. Then I'm going to count the number of training points that I have gotten off of my Chiefs card. So 2 there, so 22. Then I'm going to count up the number of tokens that I have for deals. So 23, 24, and Vengeance, 25, 26, 27. And then I'm going to subtract the number of wounds that I have. So that brings me back down to 25. Then I'm going to divide that by 3, which is going to get me 8 points, and I'm going to round down any excess that I have. So I'll receive 8 fame points for that, which is going to put me at 12 points to end the game. Obviously, you're going to do a lot better than that, but that gives you an idea. And then from there, the player that has the most points is going to be the winner. If there happens to be a tie for this, then it's going to be the player that has the fewest Cangaceiros in the prison. Then if there's still a tie there, it'll be the player that has the fewest Cangaceiros on the event tiles. And if there's still a tie, then those players are going to share that victory. Well, I hope you found the video helpful in learning how to play Cangaceiros. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please post those in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video and leave me feedback on it. I do really appreciate it and take into account everything you say to make the best possible videos. Until next time, I'll see you later.